China's paramount leader, Xi Jinping, just wrapped up a multi-country trip to Europe, his first in 5 years. His choice of countries, France, Serbia, and Hungary, might seem unusual, but it speaks volumes about his strategic goals. I can think of no better person to discuss those goals than Susan Shirk. Susan was a senior State Department official handling East Asia, and she is currently a research professor and the founding chair of the 21st Century China Center at UC San Diego. Susan, welcome. So just give us at the broadest level, what do you think Xi Jinping is trying to do in going to Europe?
He's trying to win Europe back to China after a long period in which people in Europe are very critical of China's position, particularly on Russia's invasion of Ukraine, as well as on trade and human rights issues. So he's trying to show that even though relations with the United States might be poor, he's a good friend, and the Europeans are good friends of China.
In other words, he's trying to get people in the Chinese Communist Party elite to understand that his foreign policy is, it can work.
Yeah, I suppose the most positive way of looking at it is that perhaps there is an adjustment in Chinese policy to moderate it away from this more aggressive wolf warrior diplomacy. But actually, what he said and did in Europe suggests that there isn't any significant adjustment in Chinese policy going on. He's just trying to show that his policies have not, which are, I would call, overreaching, have not failed, that they're sufficiently successful that the French and the Serbians and the Hungarians, anyway, are willing to welcome him in a positive and friendly manner.
And do you think it succeeded? I didn't see any big shifts in Europe, particularly on policy toward Russia, Ukraine.
I agree with you. They're really the tangible results of his meetings look pretty minimal or invisible. And, right now, Xi is under a lot of pressure, especially from the United States, because it appears that his support of Putin has crossed a kind of red line in that although he's not giving Russia any military equipment per se, he is supporting the military-industrial complex in Russia and may be facilitating what will later be a Russian offensive, which is something that really is a core interest of the Europeans and the United States, that Russia does not win the war in Ukraine. And I think that perhaps Xi Jinping really doesn't understand that. He doesn't understand how important this issue is to the West.
Susan, in your book, Overreach, in which I think the subtitle is How China Derailed Its Peaceful Rise, you outline, it seems to me very persuasively, that Xi Jinping's foreign policy has been a break with Chinese foreign policy and has been unsuccessful. It's caused all this antagonism in Japan, in India, in Australia, and in Europe. Have you seen any sense of course correction, or when you go to China, do people talk about how maybe this wasn't the right path?
Well, people in the elite are critical of Xi Jinping's foreign policy, along with his domestic policies. And since the lockdown, the COVID lockdown, and the demonstrations that led to its sudden reversal, there's a surprising amount of dissatisfaction in China at the elite level and at least the middle class mass level. And I don't really know where all of that is going to lead, but I know that Xi Jinping must be very worried about it. I mean, look how rarely he has traveled abroad recently. He's been very preoccupied with China's domestic problems, especially its economic problems. But also, he's there having restored a more dictatorial form of communism that resembles Mao. And he's got to know, I'm sure he knows, that many of the other members of the elite don't agree with his policies, particularly in his kind of bromance with Putin. The Russia position of Xi Jinping is among the most unpopular of his overreaching, especially among the elite, which I think is a very important context for this trip to Europe.
Susan Shirk, thank you. Next, our GPS. With less than 6 months until Election Day, people are wondering whether Trump and his supporters could once again reject the democratic process. My next guest says this kind of American anti-liberalism has deep historical roots, and he'll explain them when we come back.